Hi, I'm Sam. It's Sunday morning. It's a beautiful morning. So I wasn't going to miss this morning because it's just magical swimming when it's like this. So this video is just me sharing my personal practice that aids in this change I'm experiencing. A change that I think of as healing. It's a shift in identity from one identity rooted in a reality defined by trauma, a new identity that is here now. So most of my practices involve the body, getting out of the narrative and into the body. So this is a really good one for that because it's uncomfortable. The cold becomes kind of abstract after a while, and you are simply here, and everything just is as it is. So I'm going to get in, and then I'll go home, get warmed up, and see you then. Bye. So that was just a quick dip today because it's too cold, it would be dangerous. The cold burns and I've got to walk home. But the beach is frozen solid, it's so cold. So, right, I'm going to go home and get warmed up and talk some more about my methods. And I'll see you in a minute. Bye. Hey, so I decided to come out onto the hillside rather than stay in the cottage and record. It's such a beautiful day. So, as I said in the intro, I'm just going to talk about my practice. And I think it could be refined down to attention, breath and feeling. So, obviously before I share what it is I do, I'm not trained in any kind of healing modality. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, but I know what has worked for me. So I'm 53 and I experienced a pretty serious trauma from as soon as I could stand. Neglect, emotional trauma and physical trauma, all as a consequence of the brokenness of the environment I grew up in and the relationships. So I lived with that brokenness and tried my best to normalise it. And like most people that are dealing with childhood trauma and cannot normalise it, we use methods to help us. So I was a heavy drug user from 20 to 40. Used alcohol. First time I got drunk when I was 8. And had problems with self-control all my life. So if I drank, I really drank. And I would get falling down drunk. And when I used drugs, I would use them for days at a time. So most of my heavy drug use, I was in oblivion for maybe 2 or 3 days a week. Never really knowing why it was I was treating myself so appallingly. And I had an eating disorder. The eating disorder really began as I was approaching transition, and I think it's because you change so much when your hormonal makeup changes. So testosterone is like a laser beam of focus. So as a man, I could grit my teeth and persevere until the the pain and the brokenness got the better of me, and then I would binge on drugs and alcohol. But when I transitioned without testosterone, estrogen gives you this access to this ocean of feeling and emotion that you can't stop. So I dealt with the trauma in a different way, and I sought comfort, not escape. So I would eat and binge, and I had a horrible addiction. That's the only thing I would call an addiction, really, was bulimia. And I think it's like being an alcoholic. You know, you don't need to drink alcohol, you don't need to take drugs, but you need to eat. So to having an eating disorder is like being a functioning addict. You have to manage your addiction, and it took me years to get that under control. So I know, you know, that once you give yourself that option to deal with stress in that way, it's always there. So I think I've probably been sick twice in the last 3 or 4 years, but I used to do it sometimes, you know, 10 times a day. That was years and years and years ago. So, you know, I've been through a lot in my life. I never actually self-harmed overtly. I never cut myself. Never did anything like that. But over the last few months, maybe a year, as I've been, my identity disintegrated, as I just explored more and more closely what it was that defined me, and eventually making contact with that pain in a way that was so intimate, I became the pain, and I realised that that was the foundation of my identity. Then I started to hurt myself overtly. So I found myself at a point of collapse, and in that point of collapse and realisation that it was me that was the pain, it was me that couldn't change, I was in the way of my own freedom, I started to punch myself in the face as hard as I could because I hated myself. It was me. It was me. And so I just started punching myself in the face as hard as I could until I was black and blue. And that's the only real overt sort of attack on my own being. Although I do now consider transition as an act of self-harm, and the brutality of gouging parts of your body out and aggressively trying to change yourself into something you're not is just an act of brutality. And when I went through that, I was trying to eradicate the boy who looked at me in the mirror through my eyes, and I wanted to not see that boy. That boy that was so ashamed that he'd been given a voice in his childhood of cruelty and self-hate. I didn't want to see him, so I wanted to remove him. So everything I've gone through in my life is really a way of dealing with pain or escaping pain. Always looking into the world for something I could attach to, something I could hold on to, whether that's a relationship or a story or hope or a sensation. It's all pain management. So as I have been sharing this journey over the last couple of years, the last year that brought me into intimate contact with that pain, that defining trauma, that really it got me to a place where I had no choice but to change and begin to heal. And so I think that, you know, what I said in the last video is that personally I think we have to get to a point of disintegration, because every remnant of the identity that is built as a response, as a consequence to trauma, is in the way. and it still holds on in some small way to hope or the injustice of everything that happened and the hatred and the rage that keeps you going. It holds on to it all. And when it holds on to any of that, it's still in a relationship with the pain. So that identity has to disintegrate before you can make yourself available to right now, this moment, and you're not anchored at a time long since past that you live with in your own mind, that's held tightly, clenched in your own body. You are here now, and this is where it all happens. So my method for processing all of, for processing and allowing the transition to occur from one identity rooted in a reality that's not even here anymore, defined by trauma, defined by pain, allowing myself to transition into a new identity that is not attached to all that. It's here now, available to each moment. So what I do is I work with my body, and the healer I've been working with for the last few months, 3 months, has really, really helped. I mean, I don't know what they did. Whatever it was metaphysical, because we just talked, but they did something, or they helped me do something. And you know, during our work together, we would look at where the pain, where the trauma, where the memory is held in the body. And so quite often we would end up in arguments because I was still defending the pain, still defending the identity connected to the pain. So every time we had a challenging conversation, we would look at what is it I'm defending? What is it I'm still attached to? Where is that pain? What is the trigger? So when I say trigger, I don't mean in the often used way that word has become overused now, where if someone says something you don't like and you feel an emotional response, that's now considered a trigger. When I say trigger, I mean literally like someone has pulled a trigger and something's exploded within you and you are back in a heartbeat, in some state connected to the reliving of trauma. So your body is flushing with adrenaline and your heart is being crushed and there are hands around your throat and you're in absolute blind panic and terror. That's what I mean when I say trigger. So whenever that would happen, we'd look at it. What was it that triggered that emotional response? And so as I've been going through this process, to examine the response in the body and to feel what triggered it, brought me so much more close, so much closer to everything I didn't want to feel. So, you know, I think that's what prevents our healing, because we don't want to go into the pain, but we have to. So I would get those triggering events for maybe a month. I went through those things happening, those events happening 2 or 3 times a day, which was very, very difficult. But, excuse me, I need to blow my nose, it's very cold. I was also provided with some methods for helping those events pass, and then the grief would come and the tears would come and the catharsis would come. So what I was advised to do and what has worked for me is to don't go towards the narrative. So I would wake nearly every night in the small hours, alone, in the dark, after examining a memory or processing something in a dream, and I would be there in this stark clarity of understanding fully how the hurt I experienced changed me as a person, shaped me as a person. And in that clarity I could see the hurt I had caused in my life to other people and myself as a consequence of that trauma. And in that clarity, it is horrifying. It is horrifying. But in that clarity, the habitual self-talk of catastrophe and doom and self-hate begins. It's your fault. You are no good. Nothing you can do is ever going to be good. You are worthless. And in those moments I would claw through concrete to escape that feeling, but you can't. And so the only way I could think of escaping that would be to end my life. But that's not a solution. And the thing that kept me going was that I could feel progress every time this happened. I could feel myself grieving and allowing myself to emerge into now. And so what I would do, I would ignore the self-talk and close my eyes and look into the darkness at the back of my eyelids. And I'd go to the pain, a crushing weight on my heart, and the hands around my throat, squeezing my breath, choking me. And I go towards it, and I breathe. I breathe. And I breathe, and I'd hum. Breathe and hum. Breathe and hum. And the humming vibrates the sinuses and the sinus cavities and creates nitric oxide in your blood, and it's a vasodilator, and it's miraculous what the humming does. So I'll link a video below that will explain it all. And so very quickly, ignoring the narrative, ignoring the habitual self-talk, but going into the body, because the body is where it's all held. The body doesn't want to change because it's protecting you from feeling all that pain. So you've got to gently coax the body into accepting a new reality. This reality now, this is where you are. And so that's what I would do every day. And it really, really works. Find the tension in your body. So now, that's what I do all day. I try and be mindful of my breath, the tension in my body, how I'm walking, how I'm standing. And you're in a conversation all the time with the pain. And it's talking to you. It's talking to you in your thoughts. That's self-talk. It's talking to you in your behaviour. It's talking to you in the tension in your body. So you're in a conversation. And so part of my mindfulness practice is tapping as well. I used to do the emotional freedom technique, which is acupressure points. I can't even remember where they are now, but you do acupressure points and you tap, and that's really helpful. But I was given a slightly different practice by the healer, and I would tap my head. I'd hold my head and tap my head and tap my heart and breathe and do that for a few minutes, and then where all the tension has been held, all the pain has been held in my back. So as I've been processing all this, there's been days when it's been difficult to even stand up because my body was holding on to the pain so tightly, and I've been walking with a limp for about 2 years because of the tension that was twisting my body. And it feels so strange now, because as I work with where that tension is in my body, I hold my back, and I tap my head, and I tap my heart. And I talk to myself in a different voice, and I say, you have a right to be here. You have a right to be here. And so my body is releasing the tension that's been 50 years in the making. And it feels very strange to stand up straight. Very strange. But everything feels right. And I think that's what we need to trust, is our own innate knowing. Not the knowing of the mind, not the knowing of the intellect. Your whole body is a portal for your experience, and it knows. It knows what's right. If you didn't know what was right, if you didn't know truth, then you wouldn't be dealing with trauma. You wouldn't feel broken. You would just be normalising it all and you'd be fine. But there is a default state for our being, and that is openness, availability to each moment, awe, wonder, love. Life lives through us. Our life is a gift that we give to the world. And everything that we experience that shuts us down and makes us hide and withdraw prevents that natural state of being. So we know what's right. We know with our whole being. And so as you gently, gently change, that is an invitation into the now, that gentle feeling of rightness. And everything that was so important to me all my life, hopes, plans, objects, money, safety, security at all costs, protection at all costs, all of that, it just doesn't seem significant anymore. So I trust myself. I trust the reality to which I belong. So most of all, what has helped me is to be in a conversation with God. I would never in a million years think I would ever talk about God, but you know, if you think of God as just consciousness, awareness, or a being, a deity, an entity, I don't think it matters. To me, God is a being, an unknowable being with my mind, with intellect, but knowable with the wholeness that I feel in my heart and mind, my form, my relationship to reality. I know that the conversation that's the most important conversation in this healing journey is the conversation with God. And God knows you, knows who you are, beyond anything you could know yourself. So to begin to heal, to begin to be available to now, to this reality, is to begin to discover yourself in God's knowing of who you are. And that is a journey of humility. As you let go of these grotesque ideas of who you think you are or who you want to be, and you become a part of something far more meaningful than your own desires and fears, far more important, and that is claiming your place as an integral, vital part of this. And if you don't claim that place, the world suffers without you. Okay, I'm going to read a poem. I need to blow my nose first because I'm freezing cold. And my bottom is going numb. Okay, so glasses. This is Rilke, and it's from Sonnets to Orpheus, and the title is What You Cannot Hold. You who let yourselves feel, enter the breathing that is more than your own. Let it brush your cheeks as it divides and rejoins behind you. Blessed ones, whole ones, you where the heart begins. You are the bow that shoots the arrow, and you are the target. Fear not the pain. Let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy the seas. The trees you planted in childhood have grown too heavy. You cannot bring them along. Give yourselves to the air, to what you cannot hold. I'll read it one more time. You who let yourselves feel, enter the breathing that is more than your own. Let it brush your cheeks as it divides and rejoins behind you. Blessed ones, whole ones, you where the heart begins. You are the bow that shoots the arrows, and you are the target. Fear not the pain. Let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy the seas. The trees you planted in childhood have grown too heavy. You cannot bring them along. Give yourselves to the air, to what you cannot hold. Okay, there's a coffee and bourbon with my name on it down in the cottage, so I'll see you soon, and have a lovely week. I'll see you in the next video.